Well, good evening once again. It's Monday night, it's 8 o'clock, and it's time for the Monday Review Show. This is the show where we discuss all things referees and refereeing, be it yellow cards, red cards, free kicks, penalty kicks, anything to do with referees and refereeing. If you'd like to make a comment, you're more than welcome to do so. There's a little slot down there on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, and you can send in your comments or your questions, whichever suits you. So I'm delighted to be joined once again by my very good friend and colleague from England, former Premier League referee, former FIFA referee, former head of the PGMOL, that's the Professional Games Match Officials Limited, and those are the guys who look after the referees in the Premier League and in the Championship. Keith, great to have you on the show again. Not really much happening in the last week or so, probably because of the international games and so on. But we do have certain things that we'd like to talk about. And certainly one, it's a very worrying trend. And I'm sure it's been going on for years. I don't know if it's happened to you, but certainly I was assaulted and almost killed in South Africa. It's the assault on match officials, be it the referee, be it the assistant referees, or even the fourth officials, or anybody, any match officials sent out to take charge of a game and referee the 90 minutes and so on. There was an incident during the week, and this is very, very disturbing for the future of refereeing, if you like, in that assaults are now happening on young lads, 14, 15, 16-year-old referees being assaulted, being abused by people on the sideline, and particularly parents and coaches. And there was an assault just this last week. I think you made a comment on it.
Yeah, I'm quite clear. I think that when a match official is assaulted, that shouldn't be a matter for the Football Association to deal with immediately. I think that should be a police matter. And I would like to see those people who decide that they can't control their passion or feelings or just want to pick on someone for a bit of fun. Well, they deserve to be put in prison. And I hope that the sports minister and the football regulator may just have a look at that at some point in the future to say, look, how are we protecting our match officials? Of course, once the matter has been dealt with in a court of law for a clear assault, then after the punishment, and we've seen a number go into prison, in fairness, then afterwards dealt with by the FA. And I have a view. I think if someone can't control their emotions, then if that's a player that's committed the assault, and not a spectator, in that case, I wouldn't allow them to play football again. But some people say that's too draconian. But for me, self-control is so important.
Well, look, let's use an example of somebody being assaulted in the street. It would be a police matter, and hopefully the victim would be brave enough to bring charges against the perpetrator. What's the difference in a football field? It's still open space. There's absolutely nothing. So why, I often wonder, why do referees allow themselves to be assaulted? An assault is actually, can be verbal. The assault and battery is the actual physical. Yes. The assault is if a person feels threatened, that is deemed as an assault without even being touched. Why do they allow that to happen?
Well,
I know you don't have the answer. I'm just throwing it out.
No, I think that, in fairness, there's an organisation in England. I don't particularly get on with them too well, but I'll mention them, Ref Sport. And they are the organisation that for a number of years battled and convinced the FA in England that to allow body cameras to be worn. And of course, there are a number of junior leagues where body cameras are now worn, which is more for a defensive mechanism. But of course, if an assault does take place, then there's hopefully video evidence that can deal with it. But I would ask anybody that's going to a football match, yes, you've got passion, but that has to be controlled. Where a young or a referee at any age has been assaulted, then that, I think, is a matter for the police, and that's how it should be pursued. So I have a view. I think that at grassroots football, I think that if a player assaults a referee, then I'm clear that that club should equally be dealt with. So yes, the individual player, but I think then it goes on to the club by the FA. They don't, and they take appropriate action. So I'm quite clear that referees in the modern age do need to be protected, and they need to go out on the field of play without any threat of, assault. I think this is an hobby. Okay, we're talking professional referees at the top level. There was a terrific interview this week by Dan Rowan with Anthony Taylor, and he talked about the pressures of a top class referee. And I read it and listened with great interest. My observation on that is that one of the reasons we went to professional referees was in order to prepare them for the game, prepare them to deal with any form of pressure that comes from whatever direction. He made a comment that, and of course, we're all appalled by the fact that his family was abused at one of the matches that he was refereeing. I'd make an observation. At the professional level, this is a job of work, and I certainly never took my wife to work with me. So I think that's what I would make. But back to grassroots level, I would like to see a referee ambassador appointed by every team. Every team, through its administration, has got some fairly long in the tooth individuals who play a part either as a volunteer or maybe in the team's administration, the club's administration. And in that situation, I would like to see someone who actually greets the referee, looks after that referee throughout the time that they're at that game. And if some spectators are getting a bit too vocal, to actually go along and ask them to quieten down. And if they don't quieten down, eject them from the stadium. And of course, this is back to the powers entrusted with the referee, with the laws of the game. Remember that a referee in a position, if he's unhappy with someone on the touchline, then at that point, he can ask for that individual to be removed from the stadium.
Yeah, and rightly so. Absolutely, rightly so. I mean, the problem that I would see as far as assault or even threats of assault on particularly a young referee, and I think the one we're speaking about now was a young referee, a teenager, 16-year-old boy, was verbally abused. I'm not sure he was physically assaulted, but what does that do, though, Keith, for our recruitment of more referees? Not only the recruitment, but the retention of the referees themselves. Who would want to be put through that abuse week in, week out? When you go out there for a meager pittance as a match fee, and in some instances, probably nothing at all by the time you pay your travel expenses and petrol and all that story, probably end up refereeing for nothing. Who would want to do that, firstly? And then which parent would allow their child to go out and be abused like that? That's going to destroy.
Yeah, I think that we're in a way we're pretty fortunate in England. I think in recent years, the Football Association has taken a great level of activity around recruitment, retention, and in particular the training of match officials. You know, we've got 1 or 2 star people dealing with referee education in England. There's a guy called Ross Joyce who officiates on the Football League, but he's also employed by the Football Association, and he's done some magnificent work in the education of referees, not just the application of the laws, and it's about dealing with conflict, dealing with any form of stress, and I think that, you know, look, you and I set an example of the fact that why do referees get involved? They get involved because they want to reach the pinnacle of refereeing, and we've done that. We've traveled the world, and you know, I've been to over 100 countries. I've refereed in 50 odd. I think that, you know, there's nothing, if you like, more rewarding than going to a game. But now we're talking in England, of course, where we've got at least a couple of referees who are earning over 6-figure sums. And therefore, it's not just a hobby, it's a hobby that turns into an employment. And that's an incentive, you know. At the moment, of course, in England, just an aside, and I think it'd be interesting, we've got some ex-players going through a 2-year training program. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the results of that, those, if you like, education trials, to see how they deal with conflict on the football field. Mm-hmm. There's only one answer for me, and that is be strict, be tough, and enforce the laws.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Something came up recently about just another issue whereby coaches, I think it's being trialed, or maybe I'm wrong, it's being trialed to allow coaches now to make appeals. Similar to what they have in cricket, they're allowed 3 appeals. Yeah. The same in tennis, they're allowed to have a couple of appeals. And once they exhaust those, they're gone. Except they win their appeal, then their 2 or 3 appeals remain. Now they're talking about introducing something similar to football by issuing or showing a green card. My God, Keith, we not have enough cards.
Yeah. I prefer it, although I think in England, frankly, we have some way to go with VAR. I think that what we've seen in the recent international games is how well VAR operates at the international level. I watched the programme this week. I don't know if people are listening in have the opportunity, but Scotland do. In England, we have Howard Webb with mic'd up. In Scotland, they have a VAR programme with the head of referee, Willie Collum. And I've now seen 2 of these programmes. This weekend, he uses the opportunity on each decision that they're analysing. He's actually using it as education. He's informing the public. He's very articulate. He's very impressive the way he comes over. I mean, look, he was a good referee, make no mistake. He was an international referee. He's rightly head of the Scottish referees. But I just felt, I came away from the programme thinking, crikey, you're giving leadership and direction of this quality to referees. No wonder there's generally a consistent approach in Scotland to refereeing. But he was also informing the public accurately, you know, explaining the process, explaining the difficulty, listening into what's being said. I thought the communication between referee and VAR was very specific, whereas I think in England we've seen too much chatter and almost VAR refereeing the game. And so I'm quite clear that you know, in the Scotland game, incidentally, international, there was a big call. The opposition scored Belarus in the closing minutes, and eventually went to VAR. and the referee and VAR made the decision to wipe out the goal. It was a very close call, but it was a careless challenge. It wasn't, people are looking for an injury or something with a bit of meat in terms of a foul challenge. Look, a careless challenge is a free kick, and that's what it was. And rightly, the goal was disallowed.
So just to make a comparison, and I don't mean to do this deliberately, but people will ask, how come they're getting it right in Scotland, but they're not getting it right in England?
Well,
I know you don't know.
I think in England, I'm quite clear. My view is, I've got a strong view that the role of VAR is a specialist role. We actually have assistant referees. We specialise in people running the line, and I think this is where VAR comes in. And I think we've got one or two referees, Michael Oliver in particular. I know that Anthony Taylor doesn't do VAR, or appears not to. I would be inclined to not use Michael Oliver in the VAR room for no other reason that I want a top referee to referee. And I want the best referees to be out refereeing. And therefore, I'd have that specialist panel. Look, it's how you come over. I think ultimately at the end of the day, it all seems a little bit manufactured when it comes out of Sky and mic'd up as the show, whereas Willie Cullen looked quite relaxed, very confident in what he was saying and doing. I thought it was. If you compare the two, I'm watching very closely Scotland and their view, and now it's put across. It's much better than what happens with the Premier League.
Yeah, yeah, it's been going now for quite a while, and there still seems to be controversy. Or are we nitpicking perhaps too much?
No. Look, we've seen in 6 programs, 6 weeks, 60 games, we've seen far too many errors. And unless you actually accept what an error is and why it came about, then how are you going to learn? Because I think that you have to admit, as referees, we've become stronger referees because of some of the errors that we've made. Because the one thing we do is we never repeat them, and they bite us. And during the course of the match, you go, don't go there. Please don't go there because you've done it before and it's bitten you. And I think that's how we learn.
Yeah, it'll go on and on. Just to wind that up, VAR, people are calling for its removal and so on. And I know the Premier League clubs voted last year 19-1 to retain it. And the only club that voted for its removal was Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think, who actually made the proposal in the first place. But the other 19 decided no, to keep it. But yet they'll whinge and moan and cry about it week in and week out.
Yeah, I think that ultimately at the end of the day, the Premier League is forensically examined week in, week out. I do it myself. I'm asked the questions about decisions, and I'm not necessarily having a go at the referee. I'm actually saying this is a clear error, and the reason it's an error, and I think we're seeing too many. I think that what we've also got, I think, is there are some footballers that are capable Premier League players, and there's some players who are not capable of reaching the Premier League heights. They're good journeymen. When we're talking about the Premier League, reputedly the best league in the world, we want the very best referees. And I believe that there are, honestly, I believe that there are a number of referees who are not being coached well, not being advised well. I think there's some coast, and I think that the culmination is back to that leadership and direction. And that's why I think it was refreshing having seen Willie Cullen. On the first occasion, I thought he was outstanding. And then this weekend, I thought, crikey, that's a good show. that's really informative and educational.
So as a finish up to that, then would you recommend? Would you agree? Would you support the use of a green card for appeals by coaches?
No, because I think there are times when the manager, whoever is making that, and one would assume that it's going to be an analyst in the technical area. I would much prefer the system that we've got, and that is, if it's clear and obvious, come in. Now, I think Roberto Rossetti, who's head of referees in Europe, and I think Kalina, in fairness to him, head of referees in the world, I think that they are very clear in the direction that they give to referees in what is a clear and obvious error. You know, I've heard Kalina say it hits you on the end of the nose when it's an error. And I think we spend too much time in fear in the Premier League of making an error. And I think we've just got to relax more. And I think that those in the room need to have a bit of empathy for the game. You know, I mean, last week we saw a clear punch, and the punch was very clear for everybody to see, and no action was taken. And you're going, that is a punch. I've seen it on television live. I'm now waiting for VAR, and VAR doesn't come in. And you go, well, why not? And are they sleeping, having a cup of tea or what? So I think that we there's two looking at the screen, Errol. There's two referees looking at the screen. I can't understand why they miss it, or why they take so long to make a decision.
And they're looking at the same screen that you and I are looking at. So
correct.
You know what I mean? And as you said, there are two screens, there are two people looking at it.
Yeah.
But again, it brings me back to something I've said quite a few times. They just seem to be scared of making that mistake, when in fact VAR is there as a backup to cover them if they do make a mistake. So make the decision, and you can always overturn it where you couldn't do before VAR came in. So what makes them so scared about making that initial decision? And generally, Keith, as you know, and I know, it's your gut feeling. It's what you see first.
Absolutely. But I think that it's almost like you've got to train them. First of all, you've got to actually, through the use of video clips, outline what you consider to be a clear and obvious error.
Yeah.
And if it's not a clear and obvious error, let it go. You know, in Scotland this weekend, there was a goal that looked to be really a good goal. I thought it on first play, it's a good goal. And then they ruled it out. And I thought, crikey, what's that ruled out for? And the hand was accidental, came into contact with the ball in the process of the forward scoring a goal. And the law rules that out. And you couldn't see that. I mean, look, in fairness, they got the accurate angle of that from the camera behind the goal. And this is the dilemma. How far do you forensically examine something? You know, we all want accuracy, but I think within the game, we also want entertainment. And sometimes I think VAR suppress the entertainment value of our games.
Now, the last item we're going to talk about, because we're running out of time very, very quickly, and I'd just like to welcome all you people who are watching the show. Thank you very much. Joined by my friend and colleague from the UK, former Premier League referee, former FIFA referee, former head of the PGMOL, and the man responsible for goal line technology, Keith Hackett. Keith, the last thing we want to talk about, where was it now on my list? Shin pads. Oh, good. My goodness. At one time they were compulsory, and then they said, and by the way, the socks had to be pulled up to tied around.
Correct.
knee there. Now they start rolling them down. Then they said, no. Once the shin pad is covered by the sock, it's okay. So they were rolling down their socks inside the shin pad, that the shin pad wasn't exposed. And now they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it seems like FIFA have withdrawn their instruction to players to wear shin pads and leaving it up to the individuals. Soon they'll be wearing none at all.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a great article by Jeremy Wilson in the Daily Telegraph this week on this particular subject, where I think he's gone into it in some detail. The shin pad is there because way back in 1857, when we started to get the game here in Sheffield, through Sheffield FC, hacking was allowed, kicking was allowed. Therefore, they had to have some protection. And, you know, in those early years of my refereeing in the 60s, I heard people talking about, you know, buying the Reader's Digest or some magazines and putting that down the socks and all that went to it, until eventually we saw shin pads come in. I think I can remember people wearing like leather shin pads where they were supported by canes, you know, to support them. So I'm going back in time. What we saw recently at Penistone Church, and I bring the club up that I'm president of, was a young player received a broken leg. And when they looked at it, he was wearing a micro shin pad. He was following the likes of Jack Grealish and other players.
He was probably the biggest exponent of this.
Shin pads, almost the size of a postage stamp. And of course, the IFAB have taken the authority away from the referee on shin pads. And I want to just read the law because it says very clearly, shin guards, these must be made of a suitable material and be of an appropriate size to provide reasonable protection and be covered by the socks. Players are responsible for the size and suitability of the shin guards, no longer the responsibility of the referee. It's beyond me as to why in a game of football we should suddenly change the law that had covered shin guards for years, and suddenly, because it's a fashionable whim, allow micro shin guards to come in, and kids follow suit. And it's all a nonsense now because, you know, referees no longer have to inspect; they can go away. Whereas, you know, at times we inspected in the tunnel and felt how big the shin pad was and were they wearing one.
Indeed, yeah. But that was kind of sneakily, that law, that part of the law was sort of redrawn or rewritten to now make it the responsibility of the player rather than the referee. And they sort of watered that down to the extent now where it is the responsibility of the player. And if the player decides not to wear shin guards, well, then there's very little the referee can do about it.
Well, I mean, the problem we've got is that the shin guards are so small. We expect a player, you know, it is equipment that has to be worn. You know, it's very clear. It's compulsory equipment, so it has to be worn. There has to be a shin pad. But no the size and if you like, suitable material. Well, I can say, I don't know, another sock is suitable material. I mean, I just, you know, what we've had with the IFAB, I think, over recent years is we've had the influence of the playing side coming in on the laws of the game. I'm not against that. But what is important is that when they come up with this idea, somebody says, well, we should allow micro shin pads, and that's up to the player and not up That's when the people who are responsible for the laws of the game and the officials who've had years of experience should say, no, just a minute, wait. And you know, our club at Penistone, we have about 30 teams of all different ages and boys and girls and youths. There's a clear blanket ban. We banned it. We said, no, we want shin guards that protect the full leg. And I guess one of the problems that people now face is, where do we buy them?
Yeah.
Because I can go into a sports shop and I can buy a micro shin pad, and I'll look around and I'll look around again in a short while. Tomorrow, in fact, I'll go specifically into a sports shop looking for some shin pads, not to buy, but to have a look to see how readily they're available.
I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think? Should players have to wear shin pads or not? Do you think it should be left up to the individuals involved? That's all for this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Thanks, Keith, for joining me as well. And until we do it all again next Monday, 8 o'clock, same channel, same place. Good night and God bless. Thanks, Keith.
Good night. Good night.